now there are economic headwinds. There's all kinds of political headwinds. There's tragedies and things globally and all this kind of stuff. But that's been going on for a very, very long time, long before we ever got here. Mm-hmm. So how do we navigate that? And you can. And so to me, story, if you think of life in terms of story, then you need to know the answer to this question: who you are. Who are you intended to be? What is the story? What is the reason you are here right now at this time and place? Because if you don't step into who you are, nobody will. Only you can bring to this world what you have to offer.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Executive Health and Life. I'm your host, Julian Hayes II. And as I always like to say, back with some fascinating guests. And today we have two guests again, And so today I'll start off with a quote from John F. Kennedy. He said that conformity is the jailer of freedom and the enemy of growth. Now, I'm sure he wasn't talking about business at that point when he made that quote, but I thought it was very applicable today. Because if you ask the majority of entrepreneurs and people who have chosen this non-conventional path, or people who have just chosen something that's just different from the grain, they'll say they're passionate about their product or service. But I can guarantee you that 100% of the people have a desire for freedom, a freedom to live truly free on their terms. But to make that a reality, you need to have some business savvy. You need to be properly equipped to handle the dynamic business world and the potential mental, emotional, and physical obstacles that will most definitely meet you. So my guests today, George Black and A.J. Bishop, are the dynamic duo behind the Get Busy Savvy podcast. So without further ado, how are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Awesome to hear. Awesome to hear. And so I have to know, I think I saw it somewhere and it said young entrepreneur, old entrepreneur. And so how did you guys even meet?
AJ, you want to start that?
Yeah. So I was an entrepreneur starting off in an entrepreneurship contest at my school. It was a university contest, and part of that contest was they gave us housing over the summer to stay on campus. And as part of my fitness journey, I usually play basketball, but there weren't enough people on campus to keep that going. So I just started swimming. And in the process of starting to swim, I was just going to the school pool, and they sell out community passes. And George was one of those community pass members. And on just one particular day, the pool was busy and George needed to share a lane with me. And we started talking.
Yeah, it was really pretty funny because this is the part AJ doesn't tell. So I get into the lane and it's a 50-meter pool, and I swim down and back, and my goggles were messed up, so I stop. And he looks over at me. He goes, "You're not even out of breath." I said, "Well, I just started." He didn't swim normally. He says he's played basketball. He's a basketball player. So yeah, we started talking, and he made so we met a couple more times, and he looked at some of my YouTube channel and said, you're really a long form content guy. And I was like, brilliant. I mean, no one's observed that. And he goes, "You're trying to cram it in too short. And have you ever thought of doing a podcast?" And I said, "Well, as a matter of fact, like for the last 5 years, but I want to do it with someone." So we had no idea what we were getting into, but we're 83 or 4 episodes into this thing now.
So AJ, how did you catch the entrepreneur bug so young?
My dad was an entrepreneur. So when my earliest memories were my dad running his carpet cleaning business, and he would allow me one day a year from school to play hooky and be sick and just go out with him. And I just love the idea of, he gets to go to lunch wherever he wants. He's owns his truck. People have paid him to come here, and just seeing how he interacted with his customers and kind of the happiness that he had in his freedom. It imprinted on me very young that entrepreneurism was the path to freedom and the path to happiness.
Yeah, I always find that interesting how that early exposure and just your background kind of dictates. So to me, entrepreneurism, it wasn't even a thing. It sounded like it was a folktale, probably until mid 20s, late 20s to me. So I thought it was just for certain people. So I find that interesting. Now, did that kind of shape your whole trajectory, even as a little boy, just because you saw how your dad lived, and then most of your friends probably did not have an entrepreneur for a dad. So were you always seeing the world differently compared to your friends?
I guess so. I always saw it, and a lot of my friends, like their parents had corporate jobs and all that stability, and then seeing my dad, like he wasn't just a carpet cleaner. He ended up truck driving at one point. He was doing mortgages at one point. So he was overall he had a lot of hustle to him, and seeing that the way he approached the world versus how everyone else's parents approached the world, where it kind of felt like they were on cruise control almost. Just they know their job, they go to the same office, they have the same kind of routine. But then I would see my dad, and he's always hustling, and he's trying to find the next new thing or the best thing that he could be doing for his family. And that the work ethic that I saw him have put onto me, like, yes, the world's a hustle, but it doesn't have to be. He never was like sad about it. It was always, that's just how it worked for him, and that always stuck with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then speaking of work and stuff, George, you have a fairly extensive work background, to say the least. After I was doing a little research on you, and so I'm curious, if I looked at you from a little boy, would we be surprised at what you're doing now, or would we have totally expected that?
Well, I don't think so, because my dad was in retail, and he never. I don't think he really ever wanted to be, but I don't know. He studied geology and loved that, but he ended up in retail. And even though I would do some work for the family business, I am not a retail person at all. And business, finance stuff, strategy, that's what I'm all about.
Now, okay, so retail, my only retail experience. Well, I guess Toys R Us count. Yeah, that's retail. So yeah, I did one of the worst jobs. One of the worst jobs. I was in college, and I was working at Toys R Us, and they had this. I don't want to grow up. I wanted to be a Toys R Us kid. It just kept playing on loop, on loop, and loop, and loop. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So, oh man. Yeah. Stories on that. And so, speaking of a little bit of your background, George, I saw that it was around 19 companies and over $1 billion in increased revenue. And so somebody hears that. What does that exactly look like? Like, what are some specific tasks that you do to even help a company and help inside an organization grow in revenue?
Right. So in those, it really started out with a small construction company. And this was when I literally launched into an entrepreneurial career of leading multiple companies at the same time. And it would start on the business side of the business. And the first company I started to help lead, the owner was brilliant in roofing, construction, all that kind of stuff. He could sell, he could install. He couldn't run a business to save his life. And he goes, "Oh, so you do everything I hate." I go, "Well, I hadn't thought of it that way." But so it really, the fit is, and this is developed over the years into my book and other things, where the entrepreneur, you love what you do, hopefully, or you got into it for some sort of passion or something, and you didn't get into it, I can assure you, for the business side of the business. And that's where I come in, or that's where I was coming in and starting on the financial side. But then I discovered these guys don't know where they're going. And that became direction and strategy. And my whole strategic process came into that. And then it took off. And I was leading very large companies, and the largest being Rackspace, where we went from about 100 million to 800 million in like 4 years, using my strategic process. I did some financial stuff there too, but it became so big because we grew to 2,000 employees. And so that just consumed everything. to do that. So, but this works for tiny companies. It works for solopreneurs. It works at every level. And so now that's what I'm doing. So I've got real world experience. I've been in the conference rooms making those really, really, really tough decisions. When everything looks like it's going to fall in, collapse or whatever, market downturns, headwinds, all this kind of stuff, personnel, you name it. So I just grew into more and more.
Okay. Yeah. And so I think that's a great launching point to start talking about kind of what it means to live truly free, and also increasing our business savviness and growing our businesses without sacrificing our health and our actual enjoyment of life in that thing. So I want to start with something that you did years ago. It's the Declaration of Independence for Entrepreneurs that I saw. And I thought that was interesting. Right. And so we had 3 key actions. Number 1 was to live life to the full with balance and significance. Number 2 was to truly have the liberty to reach your vision as your true self. And number 3 was free to pursue happiness through success in free enterprise. Which of those 3 do you think is the most challenging for entrepreneurs to fully adopt?
I'm curious what AJ would think.
I was going with the happiness one through free enterprise, because a lot of times people don't associate happiness with free enterprise. They associate a lot of stress with running businesses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I had to vote, I would say happiness as well, because I think a lot of times we put our happiness on hold until we get to some goal that we have set. So whether it's a revenue goal of, I want 8 figures and then I'll be happy, or this thing and that thing before I'll be happy. So I think a lot of times we put our happiness on hold.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I think listening to it, I think happiness would be the most challenging, because it takes discipline to stay in happiness or to go to happiness. Mm-hmm. And you have to be clear. What is that for you? How do you define happiness? And that all really fits into the whole concept of Live Truly Free, which is also the website livetrulyfree.com.
Yeah. So AJ, I'm curious for you right now in your entrepreneurial journey, what's your initial motivations right now and inspirations?
That's a hard question to answer. In the sense, I feel like a lot of people in my generation, we don't know what we want to do. Yeah. We're just kind of coming into this adulthood thing and figuring out, we need to map our direction. And so I know I have very loose parameters, in the sense it's like a lot of what you just said with that Declaration of Independence is I want to be able to live happily pursuing free enterprise and making an impact on my world for good. That's something George and I talk about a lot, and that for good is kind of a double entendre, in that it means for the duration of my life for good, but also for good in the sense that I'm doing good work. When people interact with my enterprise, they leave happy. They show up expecting good service, expecting a good product, and then they leave happy, and then they want to keep coming back. And I can see community building around that. I can see just an overall atmosphere of goodness is what I'm trying to get to. What that actually looks like, how I get there, I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah. But I like that, though, because I think it was Jeff Bezos when he was talking about Amazon at the beginning. And I think still to this day, I hope they have this philosophy, is that, they're stubborn on the vision, but they're malleable on the details. So long as you have a destination that you want to get to, that's one of the things, and the details are always going to change. And so whether it's business, whether it's with health, a lot of times we have an initial hypothesis of how we're going to do something. But then when we actually get out there and start doing, it's going to change very rapidly. And I can speak even just from a content creating standpoint. This is something that you think you're going to create and do this type of content in this way. And then you do a couple videos over the course of time, and it's going to change. And so with you, George, at this point, what inspires you to keep creating and being out here?
Honestly, I love entrepreneurs, and I really like young entrepreneurs, because guys and gals who have started into the business, but they're still trying to figure it out. And, and I can just see, how I could help make things so much easier for them, how they could leverage off my experience, and they don't have to go through stuff I've been through, or, companies I've worked with go through, and other entrepreneurs I guide today. And so that's really my driving force, is that I want to impact them. And I really like the generation coming up, because in fact, I think I identify more with them than any other generation before, simply because they're not all about get rich, get rich, get rich. It's like, no, I want a life. And I don't want my business. I don't want to be a slave to my business, even if I'm a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, a business owner. And they don't want to really work in big corp. That's getting clearer. But like AJ just said, it's not that they don't know their passions. It's they need to focus their passions, which is part of the subtitle of my book. And that's where it's like, yeah, focus your passions into something monetizable that you've got some skills on, develop that, and you will keep going for many, many years. So that's what I love. All of it. This gets my juices going. So
that's the first time. Now, AJ, are you millennial, or what generation are you? Gen Z. Okay. So yeah. So that's the first time, because I would like to say millennials. So I think I'm in the middle of what would be classified as a millennial. So yeah, I'm kind of in the middle of the millennials, and I like to think millennials kind of started it, and then Gen Z really took on this whole thing of this work-life integration, or this more focus on work-life balance, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting, because normally Gen Z gets a bad rap for a lot of things.
Right. And I so I mean, to me, AJ and I, even though there's a little bit of an age gap, I've decided to be Gen Z. You can change everything about yourself these days. Why not change your age?
That's
or at
true.
least your generation.
You can identify as Gen Z.
Yeah, because my generation, I'm like, no, those guys, they're literally, I think, 20 to 35, maybe 40, but you're open, you're teachable, you want to learn, and it's rare to find people in their 40s and 50s who really want to learn. Now I've got an old person who came back. I helped this business get started, helped lead it for a while. And he's like 60-ish, I think. And he said, I want to reinvent myself. Okay. That's the attitude I love. It's like, it's on the table. Let's go for it. Because now we can do stuff. But if it's like, oh yeah, I already know all that. It's like, yeah, okay, then you don't need me.
Yeah. So, so speaking of that, there's something similar that I'm curious about, is what do you think is maybe an overlooked trait, or you can say it's not, at least it isn't discussed enough, in terms of something that every entrepreneur needs to have in today's business climate?
Oh, that's easy. Direction. When I talk to when I talk to entrepreneurs, and now some I'm guiding, but just about anyone, just ask the question, where are you headed? And the most common answer I get is, oh, we're gonna, double sales. We're gonna have that. We're gonna be 7 figures. And I'm like, that's exciting, but that's not a direction. That's a metric. And when you go, well, what's a direction? I go, if you were to say, I want to double sales, okay, that's like saying, where are you headed in your car? And you go, oh, I'm going to drive 80 miles an hour. And you're like, okay, but where are you going? It's like, I don't know, but I'm going to go 80 miles an hour. I'll get there really fast. Where is there? And honestly, and then here's the other thing that happens with metrics like that. The goalpost, you never reach the end.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is soul crushing. It just crushed. And we just did a podcast on burnout. It's the number one cause of burnout, I think. Now we don't talk about it that way, but it's when we doubled sales. Now what? double them again. We just expanded to this other county. Great. Now expand to the other county. It's like, well, when's enough? And I think the upcoming, we're talking about new entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're entering an age, a new dawn. Let me say it this way: a dawning of a new age of entrepreneurism. I think that's happening, and I don't think it's about how I can make $87,332 a day, or whatever the number. You see these videos, so I think, and the one way I created exponential growth with every company I helped lead, direction. We knew exactly where we were going.
So when you're talking about direction, is how far does the direction need to be? Does it need to be the end game where I see this thing going in 20, 25 years? Or do I at least need just the first 3 years or 5 years? How do you start in this direction?
So, okay, let me just do a little shameless plug for my free webinar called Exponential Growth. And it's at getbusinesssavvy.com. You can sign up. Because we get into that. I share stories of companies I help lead and how we use direction. But you talked earlier about Jeff Bezos and the vision. The thing about vision is that's a very far distant point, but you've got to have that. And I think, and we call it in my book, The Next Level Entrepreneur, we call it the envisioning sentence or the envisioning statement, because it's what you envision. And there's all this vision, mission, and blah, 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 blah. But the envisioning needs to come out of who you are. And if it does, then this is what you wake up every day to do. So envisioning is really important, and I think it's the hardest part to the equation. But if you get that distance right, and it's going to be fuzzy, 20, 30 years from now, that's going to be really fuzzy. But every year you get closer to it, it's going to get clearer. You're going to pivot. There's going to be changes and stuff like that. So there's basically three levels we go to. And then there's a next level, and then there's what I call strategic next steps. So that's like a year, 6 to 12 months. So.
And so this is actually part of the process, I believe, when you're talking about creating busy savviness, is one of those was mapping our directions, correct? And then the other one was about understanding our numbers.
Right. Yes. So the two elements that I discovered over time, it was like what am I doing? How am I helping these companies grow? And I studied the numbers of what happened, and all of them grew exponentially. And if you look at it, the investment they made in me, their investment was like 1,000, 10,000x. I mean, ridiculous. Okay. And the two elements are, and you can start at either place, either direction or understanding your numbers and leading and making decisions based on your numbers, not your gut. Now, your gut's going to be involved, but I mean, I've just talked to so many entrepreneurs, and this would surprise you. I mean, I'm talking entrepreneurs, business owners, and we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue companies. Okay, in some cases, and they go like, "Oh yeah, I got the controller in here, and she'll explain it to me." And I'm like, "No, she won't. You have to know this." And the most successful I've seen, these guys understand their numbers. They're not deep in them, but they understand, and they make decisions based on those numbers and where they're headed.
Okay. And so what do you think is one of the hardest things? Because it seems like you would want to know your numbers. It seems like a fundamental thing. But so where's the disconnect between actually doing this and the reason why people don't do it?
Okay. The best way to describe this is to give a little analogy in my own life. So I wrote this book called The Next Level Entrepreneur. And the subtitle is Focus Your Passions, Map Your Directions, Build a Great Company. All right. So I spent a lot of money and did a book launch mastermind. The first thing Tim said was, "I'll bet you didn't write a book to learn how to market books." And I go, right. I did not write the book for that reason. I think that applies absolutely to entrepreneurs. You didn't start your business. You didn't see this amazing entrepreneurial opportunity to learn how to run a business.
Yeah.
But if you don't, it's going to be a disaster, or it's not going to do well.
Yeah. I don't know who said this, but it made total sense. I think he said that most entrepreneurs are more of an artist than an actual businessman.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
I completely agree, because that's a lot of times what I think of entrepreneurial thinking is like, it's almost like a mindset that you always are in and you can't really turn off. It's like when you go to a store and you see how they're doing something, you're like, that's a dumb way to do that. They could organize this better. Or you're waiting in line and you're thinking about the last interaction you had at some company and you're like, their system's all backwards. Or you see a company and you're like, wow, that's a really good business model. I see how they're funneling me in and they're not going to stop getting money from me. Like, that entrepreneurial mindset is always just like kind of seeing the art of business, seeing how that comes together, seeing what the actual process is. But then you forget there's a bunch of numbers behind that. And I know I don't, and I'm curious how many people actually are, but that entrepreneurial mindset isn't, oh, they're spending this much money on this and this is going to be their margin and this is how they keep this sustainable and they're going to be cutting costs here and they're, selling up here. Like, no one's thinking in terms of the actual numbers. You're thinking in terms of, this is the environment, this is the sculpture, this is the beautiful creation, the art that they created.
Yeah, I realized today that I was much more of an artist than a businessman initially. When I was giving pushback, I'm designing like business cards. They're like some metal business cards, right? And even like a brochure. And I was very particular about the colors and then the mood that I wanted it to give off and everything, right? and even things like a website, I was very particular on the mood and everything. And now you can say that's part of branding, right?
Right.
But then I got really into the weeds of it. Like, I'm reading books on color psychology and all this stuff.
Right. That's important.
I mean, it's important, but then my mentor asked me, he asked me questions like, what's the profit margin? What's the cost of like services sold? What does it cost to deliver this service and everything? I was like, I don't know. I have no idea. I know this is just what we charge and it's just what I wanted to charge and everything. So I had no idea. And did things like operations and stuff. And I was like, this sucks kind of. That's what I was thinking. I was like, this is not, I didn't want to do this. So you're absolutely correct that a lot of us were really passionate about the service, about whatever we're talking about. But there's a lot of other things on the back end that most of us do not like to do. And probably we'll just close our eyes and pretend it doesn't exist and hopefully it just goes away.
Yeah. So with business savvy, my whole idea on that is you can lead with business savvy, which means you don't have to go do all the little stuff. You can go hire someone. You can say, you want to get if you're just starting out, and it depends how you're developing the business, if you're growing it organically or whatever, you may have to wear every single hat. Okay. Got it. And that actually will help develop an understanding of things. But I'm taking right now a doctor, and he ended up inheriting the practice, and the partner handled all of the business stuff. So he could just do the doctoring, and he loves that. Well, now he's got to lead the business, and oh my gosh, our early sessions were terrible because he's like, he just hates all that because he loves, but we were just talking the other day and he goes like, so now I think in terms of revenue streams. And I'm like, you did not think that a year ago before you met me. But he doesn't have to understand all the details. He has a team that can put the right things into the right revenue streams or whatever. But I promise you, this can absolutely happen. You can lead, Julian, you can lead your business and grow into leading your business with business savvy, and it will explode. And because you need to direct people, you don't need to go to I'll give you a great example. You don't go to the CPA and the CPA tells you, here's what you need to do. No, you lead your CPA. I do podcasts on that. We talk about that. You lead your professionals. You lead your marketing. These people need leadership. And so you don't have to know debits and credits, okay, or QuickBooks or anything. You can just lead it. But you've got to understand what you need from a number standpoint, because there's certain things that are going to be really important and specific to your business. So it's not a one size fits all either.
Absolutely. And this also ties into when you're talking about leading and people need direction and leadership. This ties into the other part of that where you're talking about having direction. And this is why it's so critical, because how can you lead someone where you don't even know where you're going?
Right. That's my line. It's how can you lead? How can you get there if you don't even know where there is? You know, it's like I'm going to double sales.
So, speaking about being profitable and everything, I'm sure there's a lot of entrepreneurs that come to you where it's all about, I want to grow sales. I want to increase the business and everything, but they tend to let their health slide or their relationships is a giant dumpster fire. How often do you see that?
In virtually 100% of all cases. Oh my gosh. I've got these entrepreneurs and they're like, well, they literally tell me this. I don't ask. They just tell me, well, I've got my annual checkup in a week. I guess they'll tell me I'm overweight again. I go, you don't know how much you weigh? They go, well, I'll find out next week. And I'm like, well, you don't. I can make a guess how much you weigh. And I can make a guess what the doctor's going to tell you. I'm like, dude, oh no. I mean, the whole reason I'm an entrepreneur is because I can take care of my health. I can work out when I want to, all this kind of thing. This is living truly free. Okay. I mean, and like, I think you were just alluding to earlier was like, it's this mindset of, we just have to keep grinding till we reach that goal, which we're going to change anyhow when we get there. We're going to move the goalpost. You're never going to get there.
Yeah, and I think I heard Tim Grover. I think it was Tim Grover in one of those books where he talks about people just say, I'm just grinding. That if you just always just keep grinding and grinding and grinding, you're just going to be sawdust at the end.
Or pulverized.
Yeah. So so that's a very interesting thing. Let's see where I want to go with this. I want to ask about. There's been 27 industries, I believe, I've seen that you've done work in.
Right.
And besides direction, or people not having direction or knowing the numbers, I'm curious, what are some other commonalities that you've noticed across entrepreneurs in all industries that you can link to and say this is a common, mistake and habit that they always do?
Here's what typically happens is, and this is a quote from the movie The Legend of Bagger Vance, they get buried. This happens to every business owner. I'll put me in there too. We get buried under all the wouldas and couldas and shouldas. We get buried in all the details. And most business owners are operating tactically, not strategically. And this is a big problem because, and I'll give you a perfect example, is marketing. I've been pitched marketing stuff in leading these different companies to these companies. And, we're going to give you a marketing strategy. You know what it actually is? If you understand true strategy, and this is in my book, we talk about that. They're not giving you marketing strategy. They're giving you marketing tactics. There is no overarching strategy. So you have to get out of the weeds. You've got to keep yourself unburied with all of the fires that you're trying to put out and get above the business. Vern Harnish, I think, was the original person who said, you got to work on your business, not in your business. And that's what the Next Level Navigator does. That's my strategic process. It's in the book, but it's about you just pull that out periodically and you go, oh yeah, now I remember where I'm headed. And then we just have strategy after strategy after strategy, and they're all structured. So there's a complete plan from vision to application to boots on the ground. Here's where we're going right now, tomorrow. And you have to keep reminding yourself of that, because otherwise you just get overwhelmed with, whatever all the issues are that are just coming up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I see, this strategy versus tactics and just getting buried.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes a lot of sense. And so I'm going to slightly move to another topic. And so AJ, I'm curious, in your entrepreneur journey so far, what has been perhaps the biggest kind of challenge for you, or obstacle, or the thing that you noticed that you've had to really work on for yourself?
Yeah, so I started my first company when I was like 20 years old, and as part of that entrepreneurship competition, and I was still in school. So I didn't really have much of an understanding of business, I found out. And the understanding I was getting was from school, which, as I reflect back on it, is very like descriptive, in that you learn marketing, and there's the 4 P's of marketing, and then you do a SWOT analysis on your business. And
they still teach that? I'm sorry to interrupt. They still teach that?
Yes, they still teach the 4 P's of marketing as of 2023.
Oh my goodness.
Wait,
okay, sorry.
I know the 5 D's of dodgeball, but what are the 4 P's of marketing? And why wouldn't they be the 4 M's of marketing? But anyhow,
product, place, price, and promotion.
Promotion. Yeah. I was a marketing major in international business, like collateral minor or whatever you call it. And so, because I like I said, when I was in marketing, I wanted to work for like a cool, like clothing company, fashion company, and just be in a high rise office and just being part of an idea campaign. And then they told me that you have to do like sales on the ground and be like account execs or whatever that is. And that's when I just went to medical school instead.
And that sounds very similar to how I felt about business school. I was like, oh, wait, this is what you want me to do? It's all like business, or what you learn in university, relating it to what George is talking about, is all tactical thinking. So right when I started my business, I was all coming from the university. So everything I was doing was just tactical thinking. Like I literally went on my whiteboard, wrote the different departments: marketing, finance, accounting, legal. Like I wrote them out, and then wrote a bunch of things that I needed to get done that were all just tactics. And because I was, the only person running it, I'm all of these departments. And like universities are teaching you kind of from a corporate level thinking in departments, think in tactics, think in these little things need to get done. And so that's what I started doing as I started my business. And when I look back at it, it's so much wasted time. And when I started talking to George about my business, I was like, George is talking, it's almost like I have to learn a new language to be able to relate to what George is trying to say here, because he's talking fully from strategy. He's talking fully from direction, and everything I had trained and learned and thought I was supposed to learn by going to university was all just tactics.
I remember, AJ, one day, so this was early on, and we would meet and we were practicing. We were planning the podcast. We were doing all that stuff. And he goes, "Hey, I've been spending all this time trying to figure out an accounting software to get." And I go, "Why?" And he goes, "Well, I've got to know how I'm going to account for everything." I go, "You don't even have any sales yet." He goes, he just went boom. He was like, "Well, I thought that's what I was supposed to do." I said, I would figure out how to get sales way before I'd worry about how to get an accounting software package.
Yeah, I remember I spent time, I was crafting up like an extensive business plan.
Oh yeah. Mr. A in my book, who's, well, I have to explain that, but yeah, he's not a real fan of business plans.
Yeah. I was thinking of a huge business plan. And then like you, I was thinking of departments as well, because we're taught. So I think they just assume when you're taught that you're already like this multi-million dollar company already. Exactly. Just that's your default state. Like you don't start at zero, you start at like 50 million or something with some of the tactics that they're giving you.
That is what they're teaching you for, right? They're preparing you to go take a Fortune 500 job or take a job with a big company that already has those departments set up. So they're not teaching you so that you can go set it up on your own. They're teaching you so you can go work for somebody else.
Yeah. It's very It's a very interesting thing. I told somebody, and I hope he didn't mind, but I don't think he mind. I hope he didn't tell too many people though, because he was in college. He's going to business. I told him I'm not sure I would do a business major. I can probably go on Coursera and other online places and learn the 4 Ps, or I can go to Amazon and grab probably the top 30 best-selling marketing books and learn more on how to actually do marketing. And then you could probably go find a job if you really wanted to get in there, more so than using a degree for that. But I don't know. That was just based off what I learned in marketing, which was, just things to take a test on. Yep. But I've never thought about the 4 Ps of marketing so far in my journey.
and that would be the same advice I would give. Like, school at this point, because it's so expensive, you have to be very, very thoughtful on what you're deciding to go spend that money on, what you're taking the debt on for, and think of it in terms of like a business savvy way. What's going to be my ROI on this? I went to community college first to keep my cost as low as possible, and then I transferred to a 4-year school for only 2 years. That lowered the cost, and I got a business degree. But as I have entered the business world, I don't really use my degree at all. I probably could have done it without the degree, with just some learning in between over those 4 years that would have been much cheaper.
Yeah. This stuff sounds nice. It sounds nice to have degrees and titles. And if you talk to people that are, more in the older world, I would say the generations above me, when you're meeting them and stuff, or you're sending things out in papers, they like to see credential certifications. And so it's cool in that regard. But everybody else, they don't really care. Like, it's whatever. But that is a good point that you bring up, though, because I wish I did that as well. Do the first 2 years and then go to the 4-year. But I think that's also part of living truly free, because a lot of times if we make decisions like that, and we do find we do degrees that are maybe not as useful in today's world and in the coming world, we may be handicapped a little more about the choices we make and the decisions that we have to do. So I think that is a key part that people maybe overlook now. And so as we get ready to wrap this conversation down, I'll start with you, George. What does it mean to live truly free?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because I actually kind of accidentally discovered living truly free. And because I was leading different companies, I could kind of home base out of an office in the house. And I've been doing remote before there was actually some wires to do it. And I've done remote in some crazy places. And so I thought, why have an office when I can just go use their office? Why hire people when I just use their people, that sort of thing. Well, what I discovered was I could be home at 3:00 when the boys came home from school, or I could even go pick them up and have, because there's a moment in time, like when they come in and, they're in elementary school or something, and they're all excited, and they're, you hear some things that by 5 or 6 o'clock, they don't even remember. They've moved on. And so I got to experience a life like that. Plus, as they got older, we were able to do things other dads couldn't do because they're stuck in their job. And so I go on a 2-week backpacking trip with my sons, or, we just did these amazing things because it was like, I could just plan that out, clear the schedule. And see, because a lot of them say, well, I can't just take one kid backpacking and then I've got, that would use up all my vacation time and I couldn't, and they're having to balance. I mean, I get all of those. Those are all real issues. But to me, living truly free was what I actually discovered was, I got to do the work, but I can do it at 10 o'clock at night when they're in bed. I mean, this work it's not time sensitive in the sense that I got to do it between 8 and 5 o'clock. And so it was, and I was having a ton of fun. I loved what I was doing for years. And then I was like ready to move on to something else. So that's so the book comes out, all this kind of stuff. The book is a passion book. I mean, it's out of my heart and it's what I love. And so, and I discovered I'm a writer. I'm very creative. So the whole thing, when you were talking about creativity and all of that, that's absolutely true. And so To me, living truly free, and like now, it's like, yeah, I have kind of a plan on health and working out, and I work out 5 to 6 times a week, every day almost, and so it's like that's to me. I don't know what it would look like for everybody, but it's about being able to have a life, live in relationships, family, time, impacting your worlds for good, all that sort of thing.
So what about you, AJ? What do you think?
Yeah, my answer would be very, very similar because like I was talking about with my dad, one of his biggest motivators in life is that his dad wasn't around when he was growing up. And so when I came into the world, he made it his only mission was no matter what, I'm going to make sure I'm there to take care of him. And no job's going to get in my way of that. That's where that was his number one priority. And so for me, it's very much the same thing of, I don't have kids yet. I don't want them in the very near future. Push them off a little bit, but I do want to be in a position. To me, when living truly free, what is once they do come, they become my priority. It doesn't sound like free is like and now I work for the kids, but it's like to me, being able to pour my all into the next generation. That's what living truly free is, and also being able to live a fulfilled life because. It's one thing if you're doing a very stressful job and I'm able to figure out something that I'm able to be there for the kids still, but I'm not my full self. I'm not bringing my best self to my kids because the job is taking so much of me away and taking me out of my passion. So to me, living truly free is being able to live into the person that I'm meant to be and be able to bring that to the world, invest that into my relationships and not have any forces that are taking that away from me. Like the health thing is a huge part of it. I don't want a job where I'm not going to have time to work out or not have the energy to work out because working out is a very big part of my life. So it to me, living truly free is being able to pursue goodness at every turn as much as I can without those constraints against it.
Yeah, I love both those answers. And I'm going to quickly touch on this is that one of the other, I think, blogs that you had years ago was you're talking about using story to interpret and reinvent ourselves through difficult times. And I wanted to quickly touch on that because, business is tough and different geopolitical things. It's an election year and then other economic things that are going on. Business can be really tough for people right now to get going, to get momentum, or maybe some people it's gone backwards. And so you want to speak on that just a little bit on the power of story and using that to reinvent ourselves?
Yeah, let me think about that because I think my approach is that the entrepreneurs I want to reach, the entrepreneurs I want to impact for good is you guys are the heroes. And in the hero journey, which is the kind of the classic hero journey, you start out, all that kind of thing. At some point, the hero meets a mentor, a guide, someone to show him the way. Okay. And in all the great stories, you see that. The other thing you see in all the great stories is there's some kind of enemy. There's some force that's evil force or something. And that's because that's in our lives too. I mean, that's why they're great stories. We don't live in a world where, right now that the economy could be going right over a cliff. Okay. But all that means for entrepreneurs is there's opportunity. Interest rates are at 7%. All that means I've got a friend who switched jobs, left his corporate job to be an entrepreneur, to buy and sell houses. And I said, well, what do you think about? He goes, oh, it's just another opportunity. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so entrepreneurial. And it was like, it was actually a refreshing kind of breeze in my face because entrepreneurs view this now there are economic headwinds. There's all kinds of political headwinds. There's tragedies and things globally and all this kind of stuff. But that's been going on for a very, very long time, long before we ever got here. So how do we navigate that? And you can. And so to me, story, if you think of life in terms of story, then you need to know the answer to this question: who you are, who are you intended to be? What is the story? What is the reason you are here right now at this time and place? Because if you don't step into who you are, nobody will. Only you can bring to this world what you have to offer. Nobody else can. You're a unique combination of emotions and ideas and creativity and all sorts of things. And whether you're an entrepreneur or not, I mean, that's what we focused on in this conversation. But it doesn't matter. You need to bring your whole self into your life and view it. It's a story. And what is the story?
Man, that's a great way. I had one last question, but that was such a great way to culminate this conversation that I'm going to leave it at that. And so where can listeners keep up with you guys at?
Sure. So our podcast, Get Business Savvy, is on all streaming platforms for the audio. We're on YouTube. Same channel is Get Business Savvy. Our website is livetrulyfree.com. We offer, like I said earlier, this free webinar. And it's, you can ask questions. So bring your business questions and we'll talk about them. And that's at getbusinesssavvy.com. And you can find it through our comments on, our descriptions on any of our YouTube videos right now. So we've got that. So those would be, livetrulyfree.com. We offer masterminds. We're offering one-on-one e-course. My book's on Amazon, The Next Level Entrepreneur. AJ, what have I missed?
You hit everything. I was about to bring up the book and then say the audio book is coming soon with
yes.
me and
Both
George.
AJ and I read on it. So
okay, cool, awesome. And so I'll keep up with you guys, and if that's out by the time this is released, I will add that in the show notes as well.
Okay.
So this has been an awesome conversation. Thank you guys again. And so for listeners out there, stay awesome, be limitless, and as always, go be the CEO of your health and your life. Peace.